there's danger in the education business world where we create our product and then that drives everything we do. When you start a business, one of the first things you have to do is operationalize your offer. All of a sudden, you're not just an educator, you're a business person, you're a salesperson, you're a marketer. Don't just trust what other people are putting out there on LinkedIn as the whole of their business.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. Shane, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. I always love to start the podcast with your career story. What has that looked like? So you're in teaching, you now have an education business. There are lots of things that have happened on the journey for that, things that are really important, things that have been impactful, big decisions that you've had to make, probably challenges along the way. What are the important things that we need to know about your career journey to get you to this point of having an education business?
Hey Claire, thanks for having me on. So when I first started teaching, I was in the UK and I spent a few years there and then came internationally and started to specialize in language acquisition. So that was kind of my passion at the time. And I just want to fast forward to the kind of pivotal points to speak to your question. Eventually, I got into senior leadership in international schools. Here in China, actually, I've been most of my career. And when I became a leader, I was learning super fast. And I was really lucky that I really loved my subject, EAL. And I got pretty good at it as a teacher and learned a few tips and tricks as a leader. And actually, we did some pretty special things as a department. Now, as a result of that, we actually, at one point at this one school I worked with, I was working as a middle to senior leader, and we hosted a conference on English as additional language practices for schools across Asia. And it was brilliant. It was a great conference. And actually, off the back of that conference, I had a few people who asked me, Shane, can you come and talk at our school? We could do with some support, which was a real honor. And at the time, luckily, I had a really supportive principal who let me. He said, yeah, Shane, you can go do this support for these schools, as long as they pay you for a cover teacher for the day, let's do it. And he probably regretted that later because actually I ended up going to quite a few schools and doing a lot of support. And here's the thing that was kind of big for me. I was going into these schools, having wonderful days together, getting honestly pretty good feedback. Like people were saying, this was a great day, learned a lot, thank you so much. But what was interesting is when I touched base with those schools a bit later, maybe a year on, nothing had actually changed in their practice. And apart from being a pretty, big blow to my ego, I was really curious as to why this was. And this got me interested in sustainable professional development. I actually ended up going through senior leadership and eventually landed in a system level role leading across a group of schools teaching and learning. And this gave me the chance to really explore how do you actually help teachers to get better beyond that PD day? And how do you make that change really stick? This is what I got really fascinated in. I ended up doing some wonderful work at the Teacher Development Trust back in the UK. And this has taken me on the path to now where I work independently, solely focused on change. It's something I'm really passionate about. I feel we have so much change that just fritters away. And a lot of teachers are just so traumatized by change that hasn't lasted. You'll probably know those examples yourself, that I think we need to think hard about this. And that's what's gotten me into the work that I'm doing today.
I love that. I love that story. I was just reflecting actually as I was listening to you talk. I love this part of my job, podcasting, getting to know different people and their stories. So thank you so much for sharing. Where is it that you're based now then? Are you in China? Are you in the UK? Are you somewhere else? And what does your day to day look like as a consultant going into schools?
Yeah, so I'm based in Shanghai in China at the minute. I've got my little studio here, which I'm sat in right in the minute, where I record my podcast, which is one of my favorite things to do. Just like you, I've got a podcast, Education Leaders, which is a leadership development podcast. But my day to day is a lot of leadership development, organizational coaching work. I do a lot of writing. I've got a book, Change Starts Here, that I co-authored with Ephraim Lerner, which is all about leading successful change in schools. So I do a lot of work around that, supporting schools with organizational change, organizational development, and sustainable change. I also run leadership programs. So I have my own leadership intensive program, which takes up a lot of my time delivering, supporting leaders around the world with their development, as well as being a one-to-one coach. So quite varied. I'm lucky that I spend a lot of time in schools and that I get to work with schools across the world, which is super, super exciting.
That'll be why your audio sounds so good, because you're in a podcast studio. So thank you, because you're making my podcast sound good because of that. Do you know, I have a real love for personal development and coaching, not necessarily me being the coach. I'm probably a better mentor than a coach, but I've been on that journey. I've had a number of different coaches, and I think it's a really important thing, and it's something I'm really passionate about, actually, opening that up to the education world. And I'm interested to know from your perspective, and it might be difficult to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, you've been in the teaching world, you're still in the teaching world, but you're also in the business world. When it comes to coaching and understanding yourself and being able to make change and improve yourself, what are the differences between what teachers face and what business owners face? Or is it the same and it's just that we have to open ourselves up to it, and perhaps maybe in the education world, maybe we're not encouraged or pushed as much or forced down that route? Or are we? Do we, in education, do we have those experiences, but we just end up with a different outcome? I'm just interested to know your thoughts of coaching in both of those worlds and how they overlap and how they're different and how maybe they're the same.
I'm so glad you've asked me this because actually it's something that I've been thinking a lot about over the last few years. And it's one of those quite contentious points actually in education is this idea of coaching. So if we were to look at it from my standpoint, if you looked at it from the business perspective, usually when people are talking about coaching, they're talking about probably the coaching that you're thinking of, this executive style coaching. It's very facilitative. It's very much focused on I, the coach, am not the expert. I'm going to help you do your best thinking so you can make great decisions in your context, which you know better than me. In education, we have that type of coaching for sure. Usually it sits with leaders. You don't often see teachers getting that kind of coaching, which is a shame. But there's a different type of coaching that goes on with teachers. That's usually instructional coaching. And instructional coaching can be facilitative in that way, but more than most, it's more of a dialogical process in that the coach is probably someone who has some experience in the classroom and is maybe able to therefore offer suggestions. So there's a bit of a expertise and you might want to draw on that as a teacher. Now, this sounds good, but it also creates a lot of complexity in terms of what coaching is. So it's pretty difficult to find down what coaching is. Now, I do a lot of instructional coaching training. I used to do instructional coaching in my previous roles, but now a lot of the coaching that I do now is more leadership coaching, that first style, which is helping school leaders to unlock the answers that they're looking for. And now, since I wrote my book, Change Starts Here, I've moved more into organizational coaching, which is quite a new idea, a new area, which is, can I work with a whole organization, a whole school, or a whole network of school to help them unlock their best thinking as a group and make really great community-led strategic decisions together?
I love that you loved that question. Let's go deeper on that. So, as a teacher, I thought I had it all under control, although I didn't have it under control either. But if you just said coaching, same thing as you said, it's got this negative connotation. I don't need help to write a to-do list and do the things off the to-do list. That's what I thought it was. Going to business, I also didn't feel like I needed a coach until I really did, because it was, so emotionally draining. And I think, yes, I've had the kind of executive type coaching, but also, it delves a lot into your personal life, I think, as well. And one thing I realized through that process was, gosh, I would have coped with teaching so much better if I had had this kind of knowledge. If I was able to understand myself better, if I was able to understand that I should detach emotionally from certain situations. I'm not saying that's easy, but having an understanding is a great place to start. Personally, I believe that if teachers had access to the executive type coaching, that they would manage their workload better, that they would be better teachers, and that the educational landscape would look very different. I'm interested to know, do you agree with that? What do you see from that side of things? Perhaps you've got a completely different perspective. Maybe you can offer some insights onto why that would or wouldn't work. Let's talk about that.
Well, here's a conversation that I wasn't expecting to have. I love this. Brilliant. So I think you're right. I think you're totally right that teachers should get access to this executive style life coaching. I think when you look at instructional coaching in schools, it's often the opposite. It's more technical, it's pedagogical, and very, very useful. Some really good stuff. But I think there are some good people around, like the good people at Growth Coaching International, these kind of people who are doing the work around. Actually, coaching can fall into that personal space. In fact, I think it was I was speaking with Matt Stone, who is one of the lead authors of the Coaching Walkthroughs books, and he said coaching is on three areas, really. There's the technical, there's a cognitive, and then there's a personal. And I think there's huge value in the personal. And it's something that teachers don't get. Do you know, it's a weird one, because I think teachers are sometimes treated a lot like technicians. And actually, they're leaders, aren't they? Like if you were to compare it to other sectors, imagine like a doctor who's responsible for 25, 30 patients. Well, they're leading their ward. It's the same with a teacher in a classroom. They're leading their classroom, and they're maybe leading teaching assistants. And in the leadership world, it's so common to have this kind of coaching, and yet we don't offer that to our teachers. I think you're onto something. I think that's a really important point.
The question is now, how do we make that happen? Because it's not like we've got a lot of funding in education at the moment. But yeah, I agree. I think teachers would stay in the classroom longer. I think they would be able to manage life better, because often teachers will leave because of the workload, but it's not the job. It's how that impacts their lifestyle. It's that this lifestyle doesn't work for me anymore because I am required to spend a lot of my life working when I'm not being paid for working, and also is affecting my family life and all of that kind of thing. Switching back to thinking about business. So I think, I talked to lots and lots of people who have been teachers and then they become business owners. There are certain things that we can bring from the education world or being a teacher, bring into business, and it be helpful or not helpful. How have you found that transition, really? What are the things that you've struggled with being in the education world and then having to have a business? And what are some of the things that you think have been strengths that have really helped you?
Actually, Claire, I think there's a link between those 2 points. So for me, it's not just thinking about how do we make this happen to bring coaching to all teachers, which would be wonderful, but probably a bit of a dream. But I think if we look underneath that, what we're actually saying is how can we make our industry one where we respect the professionalism of the teacher in the room and respect that that teacher or that leader, that person in the school has most of the things they need to do an incredible job, if not all in some cases. That's what's important to me. And I think that links so well into your second question, because that transition into the business world is so tough. You know about this. I think one of the biggest things that's tough is when you're kind of in a school or you're in education, you're naturally in service, right? And you're in service to your organization, you're in service to the students. This seems obvious and you follow that path. When you start a business, one of the first things you have to do is operationalize your offer, because all of a sudden you're not just an educator, you're a business person, you're a salesperson, you're a marketer. So you've got to operationalize your product. I think there's a real risk when we do that. And I think there's danger in the education business world where we create our product and then that drives everything we do as a business, even if it's not always the right thing for everyone. We recently saw in the UK was one of the biggest conferences of the world for education and expos, the BET conference. And these places terrify me. The idea that thousands and thousands of suppliers are there competing for your attention, all selling you the thing that they think is going to help. And of course, all of them can't help. So a skill that I really took from my time in education and certainly my time in leadership is that I learned very quick that the best impact I could have when I was leading across a group of schools, for example, was to trust the leaders and the teachers in those schools and to offer them support to make what they do even better, to give them a bit of a supercharge, not parachuting in to solve their problems, but actually looking at what they know and helping them find those brilliant things out for themselves. And that's become at the core of all of the work I do, whether that be in Education Leaders, which is my business, or whether that be through my not-for-profit work collaborative. It's all about, for me, trying to empower schools to have the confidence to know we have the answers here. We may just need some tools to work them out so that they can then really usefully engage with any external providers. I think that would be my biggest takeaway. Now, is that wise business move? Maybe not, because if I'd operationalized a product and just sold into the pain points, maybe I'd be making a lot more money. But I feel like it's an ethical stance to take, and it's one that I try to share and advocate for.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. It's really nice to know that you're not the only person who's thinking about this from an ethical standpoint. We're having a lot of conversations at the moment about what we're providing and looking at it from that ethical standpoint. I want to just pick up on what you said about confidence, about schools having confidence. And that is probably the crux of a lot of the issues that we see in school, isn't it? Because you have Ofsted, you have maybe MAT CEOs or the board, maybe you've got the local authority. Basically, you've got people breathing down your neck all the time, telling you everything you did wrong, not really telling you anything that you did right, let's be honest. And of course, confidence is going to take a hit there. So with the work you do, what kind of success have you seen when a school does have the confidence rather than, before you worked with them and it's not there? What kind of transformations do you actually see?
Oh, okay. Love that question. So I think if I was to think about it, there would be three things that I see pretty consistently when a school feels more confidence. So the first is this sense of honesty, like real honesty amongst the team, not like just like polite kind of honesty. I'm talking about psychological safety. It's from Amy Edmondson's research, actually, that's been super influential for me. So the idea that when people feel safe to speak up, teams start performing better. And I reckon confidence is a real precondition for that safety. And when you start to see a school becoming more confident, you start to see people start to say things like, actually, I don't think that's working. And saying it in a kind, giving way so that there's a genuine dialogue happening in the school. I think the second thing that I see, and this is quite a shift when a school becomes more confident, is decision making. Like confident schools are not just in the waiting loop. And it sounds quite simple, but it's actually quite profound, because I think a lot of schools are stuck in this waiting loop or permission loop, where nobody wants to kind of move forward with anything in the organization until it's signed up, and maybe the person above them is like waiting for data, and the data won't come until someone else acts. So you're just in this like big loop, and confidence breaks in that loop. I think in confident organizations, leaders start to make little things all the time, little changes, like they start to test ideas, they learn quickly. They're not waiting for a perfect plan, which I think is really cool to start seeing. And the third thing, and I think the thing that excites me most, is that I've seen culture shift. I worked with a school this year where a culture really was quite embedded, this culture of blame. And what shifted after we did a lot of work together and they started to become more confident in themselves is they were shifting from this blame culture within the staff to this one about learning. Because I think when a school lacks confidence, failure becomes really dangerous, right? Like to fail is a dangerous thing to do in a school that's not confident. People start hiding their mistakes. They avoid risks. They stick to just what works well. But that as confidence build, that failure, well, actually, that just becomes data for new things, right? You don't need to bury those feelings. You can really lean in and explore them. It's kind of similar to like Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, if you like. So they're just a few things that come to mind. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It absolutely makes sense. I think we have this notion sometimes that schools are not like businesses, but in some ways they are, and sometimes even more badly run because the money's free in some respects. And you don't find out until it's too late sometimes that maybe things aren't working if you don't have the right mindset or the right systems in place to make sure that doesn't happen. I think everything you've described, I've experienced in business as well, especially that whole thing around confidence where, we employ a lot of ex-teachers where maybe they've left the classroom because of the confidence issue. Maybe we've not realized that was it. They probably haven't realized that as well because it's about self-awareness. But then to bring that into another organization and it become a problem there when you've got lots of people who are not confident because things that have happened in another organization. And so, yeah, that is, everything you've described, the things that we've had to work through as a growing company. So, yeah, 100%, 100%. What do you feel like you found really hard about the business side of things that nobody really warned you about?
Claire, well, this one is super easy for me, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that you learn as a business. And my business has just been around for 2.5 years. And my goodness, has it been a steep learning curve. But I think the one thing that really stands out to me is how difficult at first and then how different the sales process is to what you expect. Now, I'm not saying that all of us, when we go into a business, we're totally naive that sales is going to be easy. But there is a part of you that thinks, I've got something good. You've left education. For me, it was, I had a confident grasp of change management and leadership ideas. And I thought, well, do you know what? I've done really well in my job. People have wanted me in their schools to work with them and all these different things in my previous role. So if I just package that, then people will naturally want to work with me again. And while that was true for the contacts that I already had, I realized very quick that it wasn't sustainable just to run off that word of mouth. And I had to get good at sales. In the early days of my business, I launched my first course. It's still live now, still getting people coming through, but of course for teaching English as an additional language, especially in international schools, because this was an area that I was passionate about and I saw a gap. And at first when I made it, I got a few people, but it was so much less than I ever realized. And sometimes you think, if I build it and it's good, they'll come. And I really had a bit of a wake-up call with that and had to start to lean into, well, actually, how do you approach people to get involved with the work you do in a way that doesn't feel icky and salesy? I haven't fully figured it out yet. I've got some brilliant people working with me who are helping me with that. And it's a working journey. I don't know. Did you feel that ick feeling when you first had to start selling?
Absolutely, I did. Absolutely. It was less so with individual teachers because I knew it was such a small price point anyway. And I knew that what I was offering was really valuable. But for me, it was when school started to be interested. So I never set up Classroom Secrets thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go after school sales, because I was scared of head teachers. And when we got the first one through, they emailed saying, how does a school sign up? And I'm talking to my husband, Ed, who's still employed in another role at that time. And I'm like, how are we going to do this? The school wants to sign up. I made it so hard. I mean, credit to him for sticking with it. I mean, in fact, that's because the school sales process is quite slow. So he was fine with that. But he wanted to ring me. I didn't have a phone number. I was like, am I going to have to give you my mobile number? We didn't have an office or anything. It felt awful, not going to lie. Anyway, got over that hurdle. Then we started becoming really, really popular, and we had school sales coming through. But what had helped me just before that point is my mum had joined the business, and she'd been a teacher before, but before that, she'd done quite a few different roles. But one of her roles that she'd done when she was younger was like a secretary. So she liked being in the office type thing. And so she said, oh, she'd do customer service. And she got loads more sales. And the reason why was because it wasn't her baby. She was proud of this thing. She could see how helpful it was, and she put it across in that way. So that's actually a tip I've given quite a few founders. If you can find somebody, even if they're only working for you half a day a week, who really believes in what you're doing, they might be able to sell it better than you. So if that's an option, then I'd really, really think about that one. I just want to say thank you so much, Shane. I'm really glad that we're going to get to do another podcast episode on my new podcast that's going to come out later in the year. So we won't have finished our conversation completely. But just to close, what do you think we've not talked about that education business owners should know?
Oh, that is a good question. And Claire, this has been an awesome chat, and I really, really can't wait for our next one on our new podcast. Super exciting. Oh, so what should business people know? I think one thing that comes to mind for me is that don't just trust what other people are putting out there on LinkedIn as the whole of their business. Remember, like, I can get drawn into this where you see things on LinkedIn and you think, oh my God, everyone else is having less challenges than me. Everyone else is doing better than me. They're just going really smoothly, and here I am struggling along. Remember, people use platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram as a marketing platform. So most of the time you are not seeing the full picture. And it's good if you can get to know a few trusted friends who are also in business, who are willing to share with you the ups and the downs of business. That is so, so helpful. So get a community together. That's what I would say. I'm lucky enough, I've got a community here in Shanghai, in China. I have different business owners from different sectors, and that really, really helps me. But I've also got people around the world who I just jump on a call with once a month or every so often. And we just chat about what it's like to work independently in that way. So community is everything to me.
Love that advice, Shane. To get valuable insights from people, they need to be vulnerable, and not very many people are willing to be vulnerable so publicly. So yeah, people are more likely to be vulnerable behind closed doors, aren't they? So that is a really great reason for building a community, so you can understand what it's really like. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest on the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.